Hello, welcome to the 11th episode of our Cerulean Skies RPG podcast. This is a weekly podcast aimed at RPG discussion, all the finer points of that, and like we've been doing for 11 weeks, which is absolutely wild. These are live stream discussions, so if you are interested in these subjects, please tune in on Twitch, on Discord, on any kind of social media, and give us some love, man. Because that's why we have this chat open. It's for you guys to hang out with us and make this a little bit spicier than maybe it should be. As always, at least in the interim, I'm your host Joey, and today I'm joined by Jeremy / Zenspath
How's it going?
and Mark / SmallSprite.
Hello, hello.
And if you guys ever follow any of my content, you've seen both of these faces before on either Super RPG Friends or Jump and Shoot days. I've been a guest on Jeremy's podcast a few times.
Yep.
And yeah, so familiar faces, but because you guys are new to the show itself, as we always do with new guests on this show, we're basically going to be talking about some of our favorite RPGs, even though spoilers, I already know the answer because we've talked a little bit about this before, but it's about you and the show, man. I'm just here. I'm passive. But like a typical bespectacled white kid from the suburbs, we talk about the 80s or early 2000s RPGs on this podcast a lot, but we've never really talked about the physical side of the genre, man. So this week we're going to also be delving into the topic of collecting and the resale aspect of RPGs, why the market is so jacked, the availability of these, and maybe we'll get on a soapbox about game preservation. Mark took off his glasses because I offended him, but you are free of the white adjective, so you're okay. Jeremy,
It just bothers me sometimes.
Yeah, Jeremy, however, is fucked, and that's why we love him. But before we get started,
I need these to read,
dude. I need them for everything. I totally feel you. It's not a judgment. My little aside there is like it's not a judgment. It's just a funny little description. So
been called worse.
it's okay. Before we get started, though, like I said, you guys are new to the podcast, so remind our listeners and our viewers who you are. What might the internet know you for? Mark, we'll start with you.
Sure. So for those who don't know me, as he said before, my name is Mark. I live in Puerto Rico. I mainly concentrate on retro gaming, like content creation, as far as TikTok. I just started like making a couple of YouTube videos that seems to be doing rather well. The typical meme posting every now and then on Twitter. Other than that, yeah, that's mostly what I do with my TikTok for some odd reason, popping off with like some early 2000 AMV style videos. But hey, people like them and they're popping off, so I ain't gonna complain. Apparently, my editing
Linkin
skills ain't all that. What happened?
You have that like FF10 Linkin Park.
Not. Yeah, you have to. It's kind of hard to explain. You'll have to like take a look if you want to. I'll show you later. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Apparently, I've been doing really well. I guess I kind of like hit that nerve with people in a good way. But yeah, that's mainly what I do, and I've been having a lot of fun with it lately.
Awesome. And like I mentioned a little bit before, Mark was on Super RPG Friends, so we already know, and we can see from his little shelf there that he's an RPG guy. Everyone knows this.
Really big on it, yeah.
Hell yeah. And Jeremy, what about you, man?
Well, as you can see from the clutter behind me, I am just a mess. I'm the host of the Zenspath 4-Button podcast, which you have been a guest on multiple times. We miss you, by the way. And also, Rachel, no, I've been on one of these as well. You're not as special anymore. So we love her. I just like making fun of her. But yeah, I'm basically just an engineer, but I've also been a lifelong collector and just kind of always been into gaming and a lot of the stuff. And I also, write articles and other things for our website and so forth. I stream on occasions, very inconsistent, but it's fun.
Awesome. What was the last thing that you streamed?
Last thing I streamed was my unboxing and the first time I messed with the Sega Genesis Mini 2. which you get to also remember I sucked at old Genesis games, so that was funny to watch me die over and over. But yeah, I just kind of went through the hardware, took a look at it, complained about the D-pad feeling kind of squishy, remembering that's how Genesis controllers are, and then moving on and playing games.
He's
Yeah,
not
awesome.
wrong.
Oh, you know what? Sorry. Thank you for the follow. Is that what that says? I can't see. My thing is very small. I think our follow thing is messed up on my end. Like the sound is not coming through. But yeah, so luckily you guys will not be getting the stream notifications for that stuff now for whatever reason. Maybe that's Armor plays. There you go. Anyway, real quick though, Mark, you said that you were popping off on TikTok, right?
Apparently, yeah.
Okay, before we talk about stuff, I'm really curious is like how big, I'll keep it topical to the podcast. How big is like the RPG community on TikTok?
Well, just to summarize super quick, at first TikTok I found it to be like kind of I want to say threatening. I don't know if that's the right word to use because you think it's mainly for like a younger crowd. But once I started like making videos on it and paying more attention towards it, you do realize that there's actually like quite a niche and a good amount of people that are really concentrating on like retro gaming, people showing off their collection, people that are trying to show their gameplay. And we're talking like old school games like NES. I've seen some people working on Atari games. I've seen some people showing off like their older consoles of like Commodore 64. It's really amazing to see that it's really much more than than one would expect it to be.
Awesome. Yeah, I refuse to use TikTok. I think I might have told this story before, but I downloaded it for a second to deep dive into like these weird polycule TikToks. Because I just needed to know, man. Sometimes
Why
you get
would you do that?
bro. It's so wild, man. I swear to God. A Mr. Gamer guy says he's not lying. Great content, and you know what, dude? I believe him because I've watched a bunch of Mark's videos. Every time he's been on Super RPG Friends, he's been an absolute delight. So I'm gonna make this judgment and assume that your TikTok is popping off. So
And
Jeremy, I
shout
think,
out to that Mr. Gamer guy because he told me on TikTok that he was gonna join. He did.
and he
Love you,
did.
man. Appreciate you
Nice.
being here, bro.
Damn, hell yeah. So Jeremy, I guess that means it's TikTok for you, buddy.
I may have to. I mean, as much of my varied collection I have going through it could be kind of a fun little short time period content. I guess we kind of fit with that.
Hell
Mark
yeah.
must teach me now.
Yeah. Mark is
Teach
the,
me,
the
old man.
resident.
I got your back. Don't worry. I'm older than I look. Trust me.
Holy shit! Am I the youngest person on here? Damn,
I
that
turned
never
I turned
happens.
43 on Christmas Day this year.
Oh man.
Oh
Okay.
wow, I thought you were younger. I'm
Oh
38.
yeah.
Mark's
Oh
older
yeah.
than
No,
me.
you're all kids to me.
Ooh, damn. All right. Hell yeah.
I'm
So I'm
officially
being
the dad of this podcast again.
yeah, the podcast dad. Fuck yeah. I'm being groomed, man. I don't feel
I'm being
comfortable
groomed.
anymore.
Ooh.
Ooh, all right. So I'm the son, and as the son and the sins of the father, I do want to talk a little bit about our favorite RPGs, or at least your guys' favorite RPGs. This is not my field. I just kind of chime in every now and then. So, Jeremy, we'll start with you, Dad. The eldest gets to go first. That's just how it goes. I don't make the rules. I know that Jeremy is not the biggest RPG guy, but that's why I thought he'd be a really good guest on this podcast because, like, you still like RPGs, obviously, but like
I love them.
just not a big not like Rachel, like, and shout outs to Rachel.
Yes. Once again.
There's a very disparate, I guess, interest between Jeremy and Rachel, and I love that. That's why I've always enjoyed being on the podcast because we have more diverse interests. So, Jeremy, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Tell us a
you're
little
fine.
bit about your
So,
favorite stuff.
RPGs is a type of gaming I've tried for decades now. I want to say years, but yeah, I'm 43, so decades to try and crack into because I see so many other people that absolutely love these things, rant and talk about them. But as I've learned, which it's just over a year since I got my diagnosis, I have severe ADHD, which means if I'm playing a game and I hit those roadblocks where the story gets really slow or they have to grind a lot or there's something that's kind of, those difficulty spikes, I tend to kind of wander off. And RPGs being, 40, 60, 100 something hour games makes it kind of difficult. But there have been a few that have caught my attention and actually played through and enjoyed. The first of all being Xenoblade Chronicles. I tend to like more of the action RPG style games because you're more actively doing stuff. But it took me 3 tries to get through Xenoblade Chronicles. I have it on the original Wii, tried it, couldn't get through it. Got it on 3DS, no. And then finally the Switch let me play it on TV and be portable and get through that. Chrono Trigger was also the same. I didn't really play that until the DS, which is actually my favorite version of it.
It's the best one.
Yeah, it's what I feel. You look like you want to say something so bad, Joey.
I'm not.
Okay. I take judgment. It's okay. Fantasy Life on the DS is another one, or 3DS that I really enjoy. That's just kind of a fun. It's just whimsy. Of course, the Paper Mario series. I've played a lot of those for the different variations, and they stuck with me. Of course, Super Mario RPG I played back in the day. Final Fantasy X I really got into specifically. I would always play it from the PS2, get to a certain point, and just stop. And I finally got past that on the Switch recently. Final Fantasy 12 I've always really liked.
Oh yeah.
A couple of the Dragon Quests I've been playing. I was a big World of Warcraft guy for a long time, from launch up until Cataclysm. And then stuff like The World Ends With You on DS was really good. Then of course, for the action RPG, Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, because you have a toaster dog. Nothing is better. Illusion of Gaia, things like that. Like I do like a lot of the old Super Nintendo style ones. So,
Oh yeah. I was a WoW guy for a long time. I think people know the
Many people
lore,
were.
Yeah.
of this. Yeah.
Just as a quick thing, I used to play it with my little brother. That's how we talked to each other when he was stationed in California. And just a little shout out to him. Tomorrow is I don't mean to bring everybody down, but the 1 year anniversary of him passing. So just, World of Warcraft and honor my little brother.
Oh,
Go
that's
ahead.
you have your memories too, because I think like a lot of stuff that we talk about in this podcast is like very experiential and
Hmm.
memory laden, and like a big reason why I think RPGs are mostly at the core of their existence like stories, right? And so like
Yeah.
stories are meant to be shared and memories are meant to be shared, so it's like it's one of those things where obviously you're gonna have a lot of stuff tied up in a game and in a story, so it's like
Oh, yeah.
props to your thank you for sharing that stuff about your brother. And like I have always heard you talk so positively about him, and it's like that just goes to show you like how video games really kind of bring people
Yeah.
together and give people memories that they don't forget. So
They really do.
so speaking of which, Mark, how about you, man? What you got on your plate?
So, excuse me. So my first JRPG experience, I was 12 years old, and that was Super Mario RPG for the Super Nintendo. Before that, you're a kid, you don't have buying power, so to speak. So what do your parents get you? They get you like the Batman games, they get you Aladdin on Sega Genesis, whatever. But when I saw Mario RPG, like no, I want that one. So I played it when I was a kid, fell in love with it. That's my main go-to. And believe it or not, I have such a fond memory of it that I play it at least like once every year or two. Like I just jump back into it. Other than that, obviously I love the Final Fantasy games. My favorite being Final Fantasy 9. I love Final Fantasy 9 to death. I think it has the most charm of every single one of them. Um, I obviously love 7 as well. I think 7 is a great game. People seem to down talk 8. I love 8.
I love eight
Um,
too.
with the older ones, I think Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6 are also great. Not in that particular order, whatever order may be, but I think they're good also. Dragon Quest games, I love, and again, I cannot emphasize enough, I love Echoes of an Elusive Age, and I love Dragon Quest 5. Dragon Quest 5, I think, is an amazing game, and so is 8. We'll go through just a couple of more. I recently got into the Persona series. I think the Persona series is an amazing, amazing game. And I'm talking everything between Persona 1 all the way to 5. I played 5 vanilla and I played the Royal Edition, completed both of them. Amazing games. And lastly, for like my guilty pleasure, nobody judge me. I love Sailor Moon, Another Story.
Is that
That
the Super
RPG,
Nintendo one?
that's the Super Nintendo
Yeah, that one
JRPG one.
fucking rules, dude. That
No
game
hate, man.
rules. Yeah.
Love that game
No
so
hate.
much. And it's super fan oriented because I'll be honest with you, I've played it so many times and the battle system is not all that. But if you are a fan of this, if you are a fan of the series, then this game is so damn good. That's my guilty pleasure.
And don't even get into the guilty pleasure thing. I don't think guilty pleasures are something that I think that like I kind of I feel like it's fallacious in the sense
Mhm.
that like you should enjoy what you enjoy. I mean, there are things that I believe that people will enjoy and have apprehensions about because it's like it's kind of shitty or something. Like what's a really good? I think Star Ocean is a good example of something that's deeply flawed, but I enjoy anyway.
Mhm.
Or even like more egregiously, like Castlevania. I mean, I try not to talk about non RPGs on here, but a game like that is really a mess, but I still love it, and I don't really think that that's a guilty pleasure. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, unless you have guilt about like finding teenage girls hot or something, like that's
No,
the
no,
only.
no. It's just back in the day, if you were to say like I watched Sailor Moon when I was a kid, and back then, if you were to say
Same.
like you watched the show, you were bullied until God knows when. So it was
Mhm.
it was also kind of like my own little secret between me and my siblings. But I used to watch it all the time on Toonami with my brother and my sister, and I absolutely loved it. When I found out that there was an actual JRPG for, it, I was like, oh hell no, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So I found it, found the ROM, found it translated, downloaded, played it. I have it on my Super Nintendo Mini. They recently updated the translation like a few years back. That's the version I have in my Mini. I actually just finished it again like last week.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that was an early emulation game for me too cuz when I discovered emulation, there were a lot of, Japan exclusives that I didn't even know existed. And, like Secret or Trials of Mana,
Hmm.
I guess Terranigma in a way cuz we never got it in the US.
Yeah, it
Um
was Europe.
and a bunch of other Bahamut Lagoon, Live Alive, a bunch of those Square games at the time too. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of really good memories of playing that on my like compact Presario. So hell
Somehow
yeah.
I managed to get those translated JRPGs onto my Super Nintendo Mini. I had to hack the crap out of it by figuring out what's the best course to put into it. I'm
Hmm.
surprised I didn't brick it, but they're there, so I'm thankful for that.
I have
Wait.
to say, Joey, I think everybody around our age, it was the law you had to have a compact Presario at some point.
Oh yeah, it was
That was your machine.
essential.
You had to have it.
It was essential. Yeah. If you're like between the ages of like I don't know 29 and 39, you definitely had either a compact Presario or one of those Dell. I forgot the Dell model, but the Dell one was really big for like huge ubiquitous consumer model that people bought like especially like because that's like when computers started to become a little bit more powerful on a
I bought mine at a Sears.
Sears. Yeah, hell
At a
yeah.
Sears.
Hell yeah. Uh, so yeah, cool. You get like a lot of there's some overlap in the tastes here. Mark, I know that you are also a big Lunar guy.
I am, yes. Especially recently that I finally got to play and finish Lunar 2. It has become my favorite of the both of them. Games are amazing. I was originally streaming for a little while, Lunar 1, and that actually ended up being quite successful. But I stopped streaming only because I wanted to build a community like a bit more and then probably get back to that later. But Lunar has been amazing. I finished Lunar 2. I completed it, got the true ending, fell in love with it. It is an amazing series that I wish it's one of those games that you would hope that one day will garner enough modern attention to get like a comeback. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like Parasite Eve has been part of the discussion also recently. Like people like hoping like for some sort of comeback, whether it be like a remaster, remake, whatever the hell it may be. But Lunar is definitely within that category that it deserves to make like some sort of comeback.
I got one in the form of a little game called Lunar Dragon Song.
We don't talk about that one.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. So like that's a game that like you read about on the internet, but it's like a Mandela effect. It's like the Burstein/Berenstein Bears thing, right? Like it doesn't actually exist.
They should have
So
buried it with ET, and I have a copy of it. So
oh yeah, oh god, dude, I own two copies of Dragon Song. I own the European one because I try to collect every Lunar release. I have the Japanese PC one, which is super rare. I paid like $80 for this, and I kind of regret it because it's like I'm never gonna use it. It's just there to fill out a collection, right? And
Collector's regret. We all know it.
yeah, and then I have Lunar, the EU one, which is
Ooh.
called Genesis, and
Mhm.
then the North American Dragon Song, which, by the way, I
See,
will
that's
stream
when you
that.
know you love a series. Even if one of the games suck, you still go out of your way to like purchase all parts of
Right.
it.
Okay, really good segue. Yeah, let's get into our big topic, because I feel like this is going to be a pretty big overarching thing, and we can also touch a little bit more on our favorites as we go through this. I think that will come out organically. Is like the sine wave of collecting physical RPGs, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that includes the resale market. That includes, I guess, like your own collection preferences, what it's like for other people to get into, et cetera, et cetera. So, Jeremy, you have been collecting for a long time. You have a lot of complete sets. I believe you have a complete Wii U set.
Yeah, I have a complete Wii U set, and you can probably see in the background that's the actual store display that does work, which has my modded Wii U in it as well. Um, yeah, complete sets, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. So because I mean, and also being podcast dad, I do feel like you have a lot more experience on this than maybe even me or Mark do. So, do you want to like? I'll pass the torch to you, man. Do you want to like talk a little bit about like the resale market as it is now, and like what it's like for those who may not be familiar?
I can, and can I do one little plug, if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
mind?
of course.
If you go over to Zenspath.com, that's our main website. I've revived my blog because Twitter is burning itself to the ground. But I decided to start writing a series about collecting, going through all the different phases and parts of collecting and so forth. So I'll be digging into this a lot more. But in general, collecting itself, for you're talking about like the resale market.
Mhm.
Yeah, you've got a lot of stuff with, especially COVID has been a huge effect on that recently, where more people were staying at home, so you had more people grabbing stuff, which drove the prices up. And then we're also kind of in the weird point. There's always waves of every console. When they end, when the system ends, the prices drop. That's usually the best time to get stuff because they're cheap. Nobody wants it. It's the old stuff. Like right now, that's more of like PS4 type
And
things.
PS3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
PS
for sure.
PS3 is becoming more expensive. It's already kind of going to the next phase where it starts cresting because people have picked it up and they're getting harder to find, and the rarities are starting to get pulled out, and that kind of goes higher. And then after a while, you start hitting the nostalgia where people didn't have the money at the time, when they were younger and these systems were there, and now they have income and they want to start getting them, which drives the prices up to grab it, which happens a lot with Nintendo 64, original PlayStation, moving on to PS2 and now PS3, stuff like that. It always goes in waves for collecting, which drives those prices up, and you have to kind of play around to find it. But yeah, there's a lot to that I could go into if I sat here all night.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's like, so one of the challenges about this topic that I thought would be
Mhm.
really interesting is like trying to because it's very, I mean, a lot of people do know this, and it's like, but it's nice to say it out loud, even though how obvious it might be, because I feel like a lot of times we make assumptions about stuff, but we don't actually talk about it, right?
Right.
And one of the challenges of this episode is kind of trying to keep things RPG focused, but it's impossible to do that without framing the subject as a whole.
It
So,
really
Yeah,
is.
I wander. Sorry about that.
no, go, yeah, yeah. No,
But like,
you're fine.
I mean, there's so many things even with RPGs, like for newer ones that have come out, because you've got trying to find these original games. Like you said, some of them are in different languages. So you got to find ways to play those, which is going to vary because in certain regions it could be rarer. Um, then you've got re-releases and things like that, or even digital distribution, which changes the cost of it. I know I'm just kind of ranting on this. I keep
No,
losing
you're
my
not,
train of
no,
thought, but
this is all very cogent.
um,
Yeah.
like look at like you said, Live Alive. You played that originally as a download because it wasn't available here. There was a whole aftermarket where people were buying cartridges that had the translations on it because they
Mhm.
wanted a physical copy, or they do emulation.
Like Mark
And then
said with
now,
Sailor Moon, his Sailor Moon
right,
game. Yeah.
correct. But now that market's kind of tampered down a little bit because they did the re-release for the Switch and actually put the work into it and did that, which I know is in your ever lovely favorite HD2D. Uh, I'm always gonna bring that up.
We had one episode where it didn't get brought up, and now we're that was the 10th one, so we're back into it. So
Yeah,
that's
you're
okay.
never gonna have that with me on here. I will always find a way.
That's fine. That's fine. I can accept this.
Um,
Yeah. Sorry.
but
Go ahead.
RPG, especially like say you've got a series that's really long, like Final Fantasy.
Mhm.
I started years back I actually have almost a full set of those games. I mean, I'd be a big RPG guy, but I am a big collector for things. Um, to go back and find those, but people that try and do that now say next year the new Final Fantasy comes out, someone plays it for the first time, they're like, "Oh man, I really want to play the older ones." Back when we were younger, that would be a whole mess of trying to find those games.
Yes, and it
Now
was.
it's a little bit.
And it
It,
was
it's
because
it
with
is for
Final
some of them.
Fantasy 2, that game was really expensive when I wanted it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to just I just wanted to make a sidebar.
Oh
Just
no,
to,
you're fine. Please.
just to highlight this a little bit is that because I played the first Final Fantasy, I mentioned this on here before, but that was like one of the first games I ever played, and I didn't get Final Fantasy 2 until after 6 had come out, or 3 in the US, right? I rented 2, but I didn't actually own it for years because that game was $80-$90 in 1994, like years after it had come out,
Yeah.
after 6 had been out. And it was, that kind of stuff. Like, that has always historically been the case. Like, you discover something and then you have to go back and retrace your steps. So I think that's interesting that historically that has always had a through line, despite being a different context. It's still kind of the same.
Mhm.
So no, go ahead.
I was gonna say the bigger difference nowadays that makes it a little better for people is that a lot of those games, like Final Fantasy specifically, was re-released in the most part. You could get almost every one of those digitally in some form.
Mhm.
I think you can get all of them in one form or another to actually be able to play them, which keeps the cost a little more reasonable. Like even if they're overcharged or not, it's better than what the cost was before. You would have to hunt and pay out your teeth just to get a hold of one of those particular ones.
Yeah. And
So that's
it's
go ahead.
I was gonna say it's in those scenarios that it really does. It's up to the companies that actually own the actual brand. If
Yeah.
if that company will actually, like, let's say, respect their legacy, so to speak, then don't make it accessible. And accessibility, I think, is the big issue when it comes to collecting nowadays. If I could just chime in for a few moments.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Please.
gonna pass it to
I
you
was
just
just
there
kind of
anyway.
wandering off
Yeah.
into the desert there.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
worries, no worries.
I was like literally just like I'm serving it up, passing it to Mark. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
the,
sorry.
the endeavor per se of collecting, it depending on where you stand in it, it can really suck. For example, for me, I'm 38, but a lot of my older games I moved around a lot when I was younger, so they either got sold or they got lost.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
recollecting nowadays has been an issue. It's also an issue if you're younger trying to access these games, whether they be RPGs or not. They give you a really big pain in the ass to find on eBay because they're super pricey, especially RPGs, mind you. Even PS2 RPGs, Dot Hack
Mm,
Outbreak,
Mhm.
Saga Episode 3.
yeah, that's
These games
$300.
going up to like what, 300-400 bucks a pop.
Yep.
Valkyrie Profile 1.
Mhm.
It's there's plenty of different fingers to point at when it comes to the accessibility issue. When it comes to this, let's look at Nintendo for a second. Nintendo is, as much as I love them, they're very guilty of creating a scarcity.
Yeah.
They'll release a game like, oh look, Mario 3D All Stars. They'll release a game like, oh, this is a temporary game, and if you don't get it, you're kind of screwed. And guess what? You didn't get it, so yeah, you are screwed. Same thing with the Super Nintendo Mini and NES Mini. Everything is, when you take away that accessibility, that's when it becomes much more difficult. And there's a lot of contributors when it comes to how people are now, especially recently, going back to retro gaming. We have, for example, we mentioned COVID. The pandemic was
Mhm.
a really big contributor. When the PS5 and the new Xbox came out, those weren't easy to get, and even nowadays, they're not that easy to get. So people are still going to go back to what what they can probably get, which is probably like some old retro games.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of contributing factors when it comes to people wanting to go back to retro gaming. But the problem again is just the accessibility portion. If a particular company, AAA, if they're not making it any easier to access these games, then obviously the prices on eBay they're gonna go up. And that's also where another issue lies. Like sometimes you'll see like I buy on eBay every now and then, but you'll see like a headline like, "Oh, rare." Really? How
Yeah, yeah.
rare? It's
I mean, it makes sense
how
if it's a rare game, like if it's Donkey Kong Country or some. I'm sorry, that's
I was
terrible.
gonna. Okay, you beat me to it.
No, but if it is a rare game, it's yes, sure. I mean, for example, a Sega Saturn game can be super rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's be realistic here; they can be super
Mhm.
rare. But if you take me to a PS2 section, one of the most successful consoles created, and where several millions of copies were made of a particular franchise, and you put rare in it, and I'm not even talking about like a JRPG. You're bullshitting me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
I
look
mean
at it.
it's
Oh,
like that. I saw that about Metroid Prime. I saw a listing for Metroid Prime because I search eBay all the time. I sell a lot of stuff on there. I buy a lot of stuff on there, and I spend a lot of time on the app. And I
Mhm.
saw one for Metroid Prime One. It was like a GameCube rare, like original, like not the player's choice one. It's like, bro. I mean, yeah, there's a different like that's maybe more sought after than the player's choice Metroid Prime, but that game isn't rare. Something that's rare is Ogre Battle Super Nintendo, which had
Yes.
100,000 copies. That game is rare. Sands of
Mitch,
Destruction for
it's just funny
DS,
too. Like
that's rare.
Metroid Prime rare. Like, okay, I have over 500 results in this search. Just
Right,
how
yeah,
rare?
very fucking
yeah,
rare, bro. Yeah,
Just
like
how rare is it?
yeah.
And
They
just to,
they. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say just one last thing that contributes to it is a main factor in the conversation is the whole Wada game situation that happened last year. I don't know
mhm.
if you guys are familiar with
Oh
that whole
yeah.
Yeah.
scenario that happened with the whole in artificial inflation of prices and whatnot. And that trickles down to like influencing people to bring up prices of older games as well. Like
Mhm.
it's not just billionaires filling their pockets with like older games and like, shilling bidding auctions. You that mindset's gonna trickle down to like people on eBay as well.
So I do want to highlight something really important that I think is interesting, and especially with when you're talking about WADA, because you're talking about I guess services or products or a sort of need that influence the price of a lot of these of the resale market in general. I think it's really interesting that back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, even as late as 2010, 2012, um you'd go to like Best Buy or GameStop and you'd see the last gen games like super discounted. And not to
Hmm.
say that doesn't happen here. Like I mean I just bought Super Monkey Ball earlier today for $6, right? For PS4 new. It's not like that doesn't happen. But nowadays, like what was something okay, because like Mark touched on this about like the rarity of PS5 and just the inability to get that now. What would happen is, like when I was a kid and my parents couldn't afford like the more modern games, you'd go to the store and you'd buy six older generation games for the same price as
Hmm.
one new one, and almost like bargain binning. We'll just call it that, and
Sure.
that has been like sort of usurped by privilege, right? Like there's definitely class dynamics in play with the way the retro market has gone. And part of
Mhm.
that is elder millennials, and like Jeremy was touching on a little bit, COVID, all the things that happen. Um, Part of that is that, but now like game collecting and just acquisition is just so different now than it was then, with a focus on the digital, because now that concept of bargain binning is almost all digital. Like there's still physical sales that are that small, but I
Right.
think that that's such a fascinating thing, because you're literally taking away something that doesn't physically belong to people. You're removing accessibility for something that doesn't physically belong to people. And what does that do? That fucking fucks up the class dynamics once again. So sorry for make me get on my push
No,
of
no, no. You're
political.
No.
absolutely correct in
Yeah.
that aspect because I would just say this one last thing. Like one of the big criticisms that happened during the whole Wada game situation was that these people aren't even going to play these games, but yet they're artificially inflating prices just to meet profit margins
Yep.
and
Yes.
to make a whole bunch more money. And they've done this before with the whole Beanie Baby aspect, comic books, coins back in the 80s. It's always like an influx in like a niche market where it actually, I don't want to say belong to like a certain like group of people, but they did contain some sort of ownership. as far as their passion goes. And then someone from like a higher class takes that passion, like, you know what, you're passionate
Yeah,
about that,
let's
but you know
inflate it
what?
because I can afford. Yes, exactly. I can afford to spend $200 on Valkyrie Profile 1, which I did. Sorry, and I and I can like I can fuck this up for you, and it's to some extent, right? I mean,
Hmm.
granted, a lot of people like who are maybe like a lower economic class are probably not going to be buying PS1 games, obviously, right? There's just too much maintenance involved in a lot of those older systems, but the
Yeah.
concept is still there of like, there's a lot of overlap between comics and video games in this regard, and it's like accessibility is a huge thing that I do want to circle back to, but I do want to really quick get your guys I guess attitude toward your own collections. What do you like? Do you tend to collect exhaustively? How often do you buy old stuff? Like, what are your policies or politics about collecting? Just really quick, just so we can kind of like parse out each other's like, just so we get the vibes, man. Jeremy, we'll start with you.
So I've always tried to take the idea of my collection being a library. Um, I do buy a lot of games. I don't have specific time periods I go for. It's whatever catches my interest, or if I'm going for something that has a history to it. And I know this room is a mess right now. I'm working on building it up, but it will have a library feel as you go through where people can go and play it. And I want it to be shared. That's the biggest part of the collection is sharing with other people instead of just sitting there and looking at my walls going, I have all of this, I'm for opening and playing these games. That's kind of how it's always been for me.
With I guess with me, it's more of I've my main focus when it comes to collecting is what can I afford at this moment. And as of recently, PS2 games, which I'm very fond of the PS2 console, it's one of my favorite older consoles. PS2 games tend to be less expensive. So I that's one of my main focuses when it comes to like purchasing a physical CIB copy.
Mhm.
As far as further back than that goes, again, I've been in the unfortunate endeavor where a lot of my stuff got lost or I had to sell it or whatever it may be when I was younger.
Right.
So listen, I'm gonna tell everyone this what I tell everybody this all the time. There ain't nothing wrong with emulation, in my view. If
Nope.
there's no other way to access legacy games, especially licensed ones. Old school licensed games are super hard to get. And when I say licensed, I mean like Batman games, Superman,
Yeah.
Marvel, Marvel superheroes, War of the Gems, anything like that.
Mhm.
You know, those are really, really hard to come by. They're super expensive. You gotta emulate them. Go ahead. I have the novelty of again, like I told you guys earlier, I have hacked all of my mini consoles and I've created my own personal experience with my mini consoles, my NES Mini, Super Nintendo, Genesis, PlayStation, etc. They all have games that I loved and I remember from back in the day. So my policy and my politics are, listen, man, whatever floats your boat. Just do whatever floats your boat. Just be careful with your pockets. That's the best advice I can give with it.
Yeah.
And have patience. If there's a game like you really, really do want, just hit that watch,
Yeah.
click on that heart on eBay, watch it, and just. I didn't buy a copy of Magic Knight Rayearth for the Sega Saturn for 2 years. For 2 years, I was watching that title until it came to a price that I could probably afford. That's because emulating Sega Saturn ain't that easy.
Yeah.
So
You say that, but
It's getting
now,
better. It's
yeah,
getting way
no,
better.
now it's
I've heard.
almost perfect, man.
Yeah.
Shining Force 3 to me was very hard it was very hard for a lot of PCs to emulate for a while. It was very resource intensive. There were issues, and now it's perfect. Maybe like there might be some slight aberrations, but you're pretty much getting the authentic experience. And so Saturn, yeah, Xbox and PS3 stuff like that, they're still a little spotty, but I do want to touch real because I don't think I've ever
Mhm.
really talked about my collecting habits really here, but like I'm sort of in between both of you guys in the sense like I want a library to some extent. I want somebody to be able to go in my back room, take a game from the shelf, put it on, and play it and get into it if they haven't. Like it's an opportunity for you to play a game. I want to be able to do that myself. I want my partner, if I ever have kids, any guests in my house to be able to do that. That's awesome. I'm not gonna lie, I like the trophy aspect of games. I have a lot of nostalgia tied up in stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I have, yeah, there. But Mark gestures to his shelf. I mean, I have a copy of Mega Man 5 CIB for Game Boy. That's a $1,200 game. I have a lot of stuff that I could easily sell and make money off of, but like I just like having it, right? Like, I mean, it's being valuable has of only very little bearing on how much I actively want to keep it. That being said, you do need to address something here, and I need to address something is that is a fucking privilege, you know?
Yes.
10 years ago, I would have sold that shit right away, man, because I could not, like, I was literally living paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yep.
A lot of people can't afford that. And it's like, we're lucky to have been in that. Mark and I, especially, are lucky enough to have been part of that, like, weird cuspian elder millennial generation where like we still had a lot of that old stuff that we were able to keep. But I had one of my best friends growing up, he had the most insane collection I've ever seen, like every Super Nintendo game ever, and I sell a lot of it because of that kind of stuff. Just like, you know, his family went through hard times, it was difficult for him to be able to hold on to stuff. Luckily he got Suikoden too, so at least he got that. You know, like my man got that. My man juiced it out. But yeah, no, I think that like it's difficult for me to sort of come to some of the moral terms with collecting, right? Like there are things that I want to have. There are things that like I really really enjoy, but I try not to buy stuff just to have it. I try to also buy stuff that I will actually physically play. Obviously exceptions. I was just talking about the Lunar thing that made up ass PC version I'll never play, just because it's like it's actually rare. It's a cool collector's item. I would say that's maybe 10% of my collection, maybe. That being said, I am probably the biggest advocate for emulation on this Discord server. I prefer to play almost everything emulated. There are very few cases where I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna play it on original hardware. So Mega Man X, there's a bunch of stuff like that I'm like, yeah, fuck, I don't really need to emulate it. That being said, you know, I don't get stuck in the moral quandary of it. I'm not like, hey, I'm buying these old games to buy some old games so I could, you know, check mark the, oh, I own this game, I could emulate it now. I don't give a fuck because these companies don't give a fuck. You shouldn't give a fuck. If you want to download Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you should fucking just do it, man. That game's not even out for another 4 hours. If you want to play it, just fucking play it. You don't owe anybody fucking anything. So if you want to emulate, go ahead and emulate. Don't ever feel any kind of moral obligation besides the, oh, yeah, I guess there's always the legal ramification, right? But it's not going to fucking happen. Don't worry about it. Just don't be stupid. So, despite
Stream
that,
it early.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Despite that, I do need to get that off my chest because that has been brewing for 11 episodes, and I finally got an opportunity to do it. So,
Can I clarify one thing then? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Once you're done, I'll read Golden's comment because he got a really good comment here.
Yeah, I saw that as well. But no, I wanted to join this little group on that. Like I'm talking about my collection as a library and everything, but I firmly believe emulation is one of the best, if not the only true way to actually have game preservation and for generations well beyond what the physical hardware will even go past. Because I'm lucky, I'm an engineer. I can work and refurbish and recap and do all these things to these consoles. Most people can't. A kid's going to find a console in a garage sale and be lucky if it still works for a couple years and whatever games they go with. But emulated hundreds of years from now, that might still work as long as they still support x86. But anyways, but I think it's what needs to be done. And it's just a means of sharing it, which Joey, as you're aware, and I won't tell people where to publicly find this, but like even recently I decided to digitize my entire video game music collection, even went back to the disc-based games to copy their music and made that available to people, particular people, not like to the world. I'm not stupid. But instead of me just listening to it, I wanted everyone to be able to enjoy it. And I know Caleb got excited when he saw Metroid stuff on there. But I wanted to share that with everybody, and I'm still adding to it. So, yeah, physical is nice, but digital is the best way to share. But
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that goes a long way with, you know, like this whole topic too, is that like obviously anything that you want to play, because I think a big thing with RPGs, as we'll talk about, is that RPGs are usually expensive, man. You know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
when we talk about like our lunars, our Valkyrie profiles, our dot hack, Xenosaga, and Xenosagas is, I guess they got ported. The first two games got ported to the DS, but we don't, that's a weird version that we never got in the US anyway.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's like just inaccessible or just physically or financially inaccessible, and there's a lot of things where it's like, yeah, I want to play this. We mentioned. Sorry, go ahead.
What was the one I talked to you about just the other day? The Panzer Dragoon one.
Oh
I
yeah.
brought it up to you, and you were like, "Oh yeah, that's a lot."
Mm-hmm.
You know
Panzer
who
Dragoon
did
Saga.
a good re-release recently?
Hmm.
Atari on Nintendo Switch. The
Playing it
that-
now. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
it's actually because and that's my issue when it comes to, like, for example, companies like Sony, whatever, like they try to like re-release their legacy games like on PS5, PS4, and they do like a piss poor job about it. Like, yeah, they're just doing like ROM dumps, so to
Yeah,
speak,
yeah,
and they're not
yeah.
even like good versions. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah,
If I
right,
see
right.
Digital Eclipse's name on it, I know it's going to be like a museum, and I want in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what
Them
that's
too.
what they did with the Atari
Mhm.
version. Like they really set the bar to like how to, like, present and respect game preservation. Like that Atari collection on Switch is amazing. And again, it does also work like an interactive museum where you actually get to see like videos, see some history as to where these where the creators came from, where how the development went down, etc.
They
And
had
I
wiring
thought
diagrams. I was nuts.
it's amazing.
The
It's
drug
it's
use thing. There's
Yeah,
like
I
a
talked
little
about that as
funny
well.
anecdote about the drug use at Atari on there. I saw that. Yeah.
I was having an antidote. It's an entire like 7 or 8 minute long video where they're just like,
Oh, it's a
"Oh
video.
yeah, I was smoking pot. I was on cocaine with some mushrooms mixed into it, and that's how I wrote out the entire kernel for this system." And I found the paper the next morning, and that's what we ended up using. And I was like, "Oh, they're blatant. They just, it was great."
It's funny because a lot of Japanese developers are like, yeah, I smoked like 5,000 cigarettes and neglected my family for 2 months. And American developers like, yeah, I needed coke to do this. So, yeah. But okay, I do want to I want to bring up something really fast
Yes.
that sort of just came to me that kind of bothers me a lot
Mm-hmm.
about RPGs especially. And Mark, because you've been kind of diving a little bit more into the YouTube aspect of the world, so I'm sure you've seen this. But there's this kind of elitist mentality about physical media with RPGs as a genre, right? You have I'm not even gonna name names, but you have a lot of big YouTube channels who, like, their thing is they take the game and they're like, hey, this is my Valkyrie profile. You can get this on eBay. They're really expensive. And it's kind of like, you're an influencer.
Yeah.
These people are influencers, okay?
Mhm.
You're telling people to spend that money, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though a lot of them say something like, oh, but you can always emulate. Yeah, sure. But you're still fucking influencing people. By having physical media and showing it off and having a 200,000 view YouTube video of you saying this, you're still influencing. This is a big reason why the fucking market is the way it is because you're putting this concept of like, you need to have this physically. Like, people are stupid. They're going to want that, like, again, the I word, right? So there's this, I've seen this a lot in a lot of retro groups and like communities, especially Lunar. Hey, Lunar.
Oh yeah.
Where people are like, there's like I'm a better Lunar fan than you because I own the games, or you should definitely, there's the only way to play games is physical media. And it's like, okay, maybe in 1994, bro, like, when you're supporting a developer who's active, sure, absolutely.
Correct, yeah.
But like, no. And I think that that's something that we need to challenge moving forward for the sake of accessibility and preservation, is that, like, fuck the stupid YouTube influencer shit, man. Fuck it. Like, you're not special because your parents allowed you to have a safety net, and now you have like a pretty decent job, and now you can make fucking YouTube videos about Valkyrie profile, and then now like basically wank to yourself because you have 500 people on YouTube saying, "Oh, bro, it's so sick that you got like." And I think it's I don't mean to like get so passionate about this, but it
I don't know, I'm
really,
loving it.
but it's really something that I think that we should focus more on when we talk about RPGs and resale. Is that like, you know, people have different preferences for stuff, and there is no like best way to play stuff, right?
Mhm.
So the more we move away from that concept, the more that the resale market doesn't get as jacked up, right?
Correct. And I think this is where it falls into the line of like whatever is preferred or whatever we see as value, that's subjective at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
that's why elitists that usually go for like the whole like, oh, it needs to be CIB, whatever it may be, etc., and they're trying to show it off. They can kiss my ass too. You know, if I'm sorry, they can kind of kiss my ass too, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, it's again, just because they can afford it does not mean that everybody can, especially younger generations. And I don't mean to generalize, but you do see this a lot, like this mentality, this elitist mentality when it comes to the older crowd. You know, you kind of do, like people like my age, a little older. Like there's this thing, like there's this disdain towards like kind of like a gatekeeping, so to speak. I'm
Yes.
not down for that. I'm definitely not down for the whole gatekeeping aspect. I think that games are something that should be a shared experience for all ages, whether they're legacy games, modern games, whatever it may be. I play all. I love Persona 5 as much as I love Chrono Trigger. You know, it doesn't matter to me as long as it's a good game. And
Yeah.
that's what we need to, I think, focus on when it comes to this. We need to, as an influencer, I don't consider myself one. I just started, so I don't consider myself one,
Not
so to
yet.
speak.
Give you a couple weeks.
You know, you got some time to go. But you know, there is a responsibility to basically tell people like there's different ways to access, you know, these games. You don't have to do it this way. This is my preferred way, but your way can also be like a preferable way as well. And that way, and we will talk about it earlier, can also
Mhm.
be emulation. You know who's a really good YouTuber that does talk about this a lot? Happy Console Gamer. Happy
Oh
Console
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gamer. He is older and he has like a big collection, but he says it all the time. If your way of playing these old games is emulation, go for it, go for it. There is nothing wrong with that. Because if there is no accessible way for you to afford these games, or for you to actually or for you to just play them in general, just emulate them. Doesn't matter. There's plenty of places we can access them from. And that is, in my view, the best way to go about it, because there is a very big gatekeeping elitist mentality when
Yes,
it comes to what's supposed to be preferred. And again, super subjective.
right. But I think okay, so that's a really good example of somebody because I like his videos. I think he's a nice guy. I like he's one of the few YouTubers like I've seen videos of, and I've been like, okay, yeah, hey, like I this you know I enjoy his presence, and I think he's good at influencing or whatever. But I still think that that's part of the problem that I mentioned is that like despite having this giant collection that he like that man would never settle for a loose disc, right?
It's very
and,
true. Yeah.
and that's fine, that's fine, but like when you're influencing people, like you have to, the reason why you get the way that you are is because you have learned to value possessions. So
Hmm.
we as a society always, to my in my mind, should always be moving toward devaluing possessions, right?
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that like, oh, that you should feel guilty for buying something expensive. No, no, you
Hmm.
know, sometimes you just want it, man. That's okay. That's the
Yeah.
good part of capitalism. But like, but yeah, I mean, but like, you know, it's hard too because, uh, and we talked a little bit about this before with RPGs specifically, but there are a lot of games that like, you know, you just don't like developers haven't really been kind of pushing or
They
giving
don't care about.
access to.
They don't. They
Yeah.
just. They don't care. They don't give a shit about them.
Right, and it's like I think Lunar. I keep bringing back to this, but Lunar's a really good example because you know, on the Sega Mini 2 that just came out, right? On
Hmm.
the JP version has both Lunar games, and if
It does.
you could
Yes.
Yep.
actually boot it up to play the Japanese versions if you wanted, but we didn't get it in North America because of working designs rights, basically, just
Hmm.
rights licensing, all that dumb bullshit that always, you know, the red tape
I'm waiting
that
for that one
prevents
to be
this.
moddable.
Yeah,
Same
hell yeah.
here.
It
Yeah.
is, man. I'm sure it is. But
It will
like
be. It definitely will be.
it definitely will be. But like yeah, I mean that sucks because like that's a really pivotal RPG series and
Correct.
Mark, when you and I talked about this topic a bit, and Jeremy, you have kids too who are younger and into RPGs for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like you see a huge influx in the JRPG specifically, but RPG retro community as a whole. And
Right.
not just on the collecting side of things, but more people in the scene in general, basically. So, like, more people just talking about RPGs rather than just buying them and whatever. And so, do you guys think that, like, what do you guys think it's like for younger audiences to get into the physical side of RPGs now?
Um, for mine, it's a little bit skewed because we're taking into account both my boys, my oldest and my youngest, live here in the house, so they grew up around this collection.
Mhm.
So part of what it is teaching them, um, how to take care of it and stuff like that. But like Jeremy's been going out and buying different games as well, so it's teaching him, you know, look for the price, how to do all that fun stuff. But even then, like the most expensive one he bought was I think the GameCube Fire Emblem.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah,
I think
that's expensive. Yeah.
It
that
is.
Yeah.
I found it while traveling, looked it over, it was in pretty good condition. It ended up being, I think, a couple $100, but it was something he wanted, and it kind of finished because he loves that series. It's something he does enjoy and play. And he did end up spending that money for it because he happened to have the opportunity at the time, and he's working but not paying rent, so he's good on that. Well, he's in that sweet
Yeah.
spot that a lot of
Yeah.
people will start collecting in, you know. Um, but for a lot of people, the other kids I talk to that don't have access to collections like this, their parents don't play games and so forth. It pretty much goes straight to emulation.
Mhm.
But even like my youngest, he was big into older PC games, and I found out he was using like Android phones and so forth to emulate old computers to get those games and start playing them. So he dove into that whole thing separate from what I normally did through emulation on his phone. So it was kind of interesting, even with the collection here, seeing him go into that. And a lot of the other kids his age, because he's 17 now, but the kids closer to his age have been doing a lot of that too. So emulation's kind of their main discovery. A lot of them don't even bother buying. It's just older people that do it for most
Yeah.
of the time.
True. It's funny because I don't know if you guys I there are some streamers that I do watch. It's very interesting to see young streamers 18, 19,
Mhm.
20, 21 having a high focus on older games. I've seen these streamers playing Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 7, Chrono Trigger. And remember, these games are, and we go back to the key points here, accessible. They're on Steam,
Yep.
they're on Switch, they're on PlayStation. So there is, at least for the most part, a curiosity to, to experience what we had the privilege of experiencing when we were younger. These kids were born in like what, 2005, 2008?
So fucked
You know,
up to
but
think. Yeah.
My oldest was 2000. Youngest was 2005.
yeah, you see, but there is a curiosity, and I think that's where big AAA companies are really failing at. They're not tapping in to that curiosity. They
Mhm.
think, and I'll give a perfect example. Younger gamers, believe it or not, know about Parasite Eve.
Yeah.
I see them talking about them. I see them streaming it. What does Square Enix do about them? Square Enix, I love you, but we are in a toxic relationship with you.
Yeah.
Because for every 10 fuck ups that they do one good thing and then they bring me back. And then I'm like, okay, I'll take you back as my lover again. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But a good example is
Through a
Parasite
you
Eve.
up text. Yeah.
A perfect example is Parasite Eve. They recently, I guess, like bought the rights or rebranded Symbiogenesis, I think it's called something like that, which is like a Parasite Eve thing. What did it end up being? A whole
NFT.
NFT bullshit. People were so disappointed by that, and that goes back to what you said earlier, Joey, that these companies, they don't give a shit as long as they can make some sort of profit or some sort of like
Bottom
trend or
line.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's true, the bottom line, that's what they mostly care about, and that's a damn shame.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, granted, I know that there are a lot of logistics and specifics about bringing over stuff, right? Like, I know
Correct.
that you can't just port like Lunar, another example too. It's because Working Designs has the rights to that localization, and they probably were asking more money than Sega was comfortable with, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. I mean, granted, Sega. That's kind of that's the onus is on Sega there in a way. But like yeah. I mean, it's up to to a company to make that decision and to take that risk ultimately.
Yes.
And Armor Plays made a really good point here. Is like the influx of in the RPG community. Is if it's maybe due to indies inspired by retro games. Definitely. And I'll come back to that in just a second, but I do want to bring up one, I guess, fan base that this is really interesting and this whole concept is extremely interesting. And that's Megami Tensei. So, Persona, SMT, other Megami Tensei spin-offs, Last
Devil
Bible,
Summoner.
Devil Summoner, yeah. The
Yep.
whole umbrella, right? Bro, there are so many younger kids who are on niche communities, Discord, Reddit, forums, etc., etc. Younger kids, I'm talking like 14 to 21, who are playing all those boomer ass Megami Tensei games because it's easy to emulate them. And there's English patches, and you have people who are passionate about bringing these games and talking about them. Elitism in that community aside, I do think it's really interesting that you see younger crowds, newer audiences gravitating toward games that, like, in public discourse have not aged well or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you guys think it is about these niche series that bring in more people? And do you think it's something that is, because Mark, you were saying that companies don't really care about this because they care about the bottom line. Do you think that is maybe possible for these companies to use that interest to make a bottom line that's relevant to our topic and corporations, I guess?
It's a little hard to say. If you were to look at, for example, profits on how much they make on bringing back games, I'll be realistic about it. Not all the time do they make all that much. They still make it. They still, but at the end of the day, as also their expectations of what they want to make from it are also super high. Like, oh,
Right.
our ROI needs to be X amount. Is like, dude, you're expecting millions from like this very very old game. I'm not saying you shouldn't expect profits, but you are expecting way too much. And again, there is a peak curiosity when it comes to people wanting to play these games again. There's a streamer that she's playing right now, Persona 2 Innocent Sin. It's that's like a super old freaking
Good ass
game.
video game, yeah.
And it's a damn good series. The Persona 2 series is amazing. So is there a way for them to, it's already been proven that they can make some sort of comeback. Final Fantasy 7 has made a comeback several times. God knows they've milked it, God knows for how long now. Final Fantasy 8 remastered, Final Fantasy 9 remastered. Tactics Ogre Reborn, I heard, is doing pretty damn good recently.
Yes, and I need to bring this game up because I think this is the point that I was trying to make that I think is fascinating. Okay, so so Tactics Ogre Reborn. So let's just, and I'm just using. I don't want to specifically talk too much about this game, but I feel like this is a dynamic that I've seen a lot of companies start to do now. Game companies will not just port over games. Okay, they have to add shit to it. I don't know why this is. I think it's just because of marketability, right? And I get it in a way because we all three of us, we love our quality of life. We've talked about this in our
Very
own
much
circles.
so.
Definitely.
And so yeah, that's important. Tactics Ogre Reborn changes the entire fucking game. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yes, I have played every version of Tactics Ogre, Super Famicom, PlayStation 1, PSP, even a little bit of the Saturn version, right? I played every version of it. I know that game super well. Tactics Ogre Reborn completely changes it, okay? And in a way, that's cool. It's fitting of the name. It's called Tactics Ogre Reborn, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I like to see new innovations on stuff, but why? Are you trying to make this game more accessible to modern audiences? Are you trying to influence your bottom line of making strategy RPGs be more marketable in, DioField, Tactics, or Triangle Strategy, the upcoming FF Tactics remaster, which is definitely a thing? Is this all part of like brand recognition or genre recognition? But also, why the fuck? Like, okay, because I actually do like Reborn's changes in a vacuum. Why not give us the option to play the old version. And it's like, it's not that much more work to just fucking have an option that's like a port of the PSP version, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what they're doing with Valkyrie Profile Lenneth as well, is that they're literally just porting the PSP version. I think they're
The modern consoles, yeah.
yeah. And so it's like, again, I don't know that for sure because it got delayed, and I'm guessing it's because they tried to implement some of the mobile stuff into it, which I don't know. But like,
That's what I'm guessing too.
all you have to do is just have an option to be like, do you want to play this game in its original setting? Warning, this has not been as finely tuned as the main changes. You might experience some balance issues, blah, blah, blah. Make a fucking disclaimer, okay? Just like, there's not enough of an import on the original experience anymore of the game, right? So like, are there any games that you guys could think of in recent like RPGs specifically that got ported that like really haven't been changed too much, that are just the original experience and that's it?
Give me a second.
The main one I've been playing recently that had a previous version that I've been kind of looking into because you sent me the stuff through emulation was Live Alive, which I've been kind of going back through some of the areas and comparing those for not just a graphical change, which I expected, you know, a graphical update to it, but how faithful they were for the actual setup. But I'm trying to think of a game that just straight
There's a
brought
game
over.
recently that came out. I don't remember if it was an RPG or not. I forgot what game it is. But I remember there was a game that came out recently that's like, oh, you can play the newer version or the older version. I just forgot which game that
Mana
was.
Collection.
Yeah, Mana Collection is a really good example, Jeremy.
Yeah.
That's so good because it's like they have the original ports of the Super Nintendo games and they're pretty much the same. Mark, to your point, the Romancing Saga ports and Saga Frontier do have options to play with the remastered stuff and without it, even though you're still playing the game with the remastered visuals and a couple other little changes. And that's awesome. I love that. Oh, if fucking Mikhail says it. Yeah. That's always the case. I say something or I'm about to say something and Mikhail says it right away because he's too fast. But that and also Chrono Cross has been roughly unchanged.
That's what came. That's what came to mind. Yes.
It has the visuals, sure. I mean, the visuals that are hit or miss. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I don't think it looks completely awful, right? Legend of Mana also is pretty intact, but I'm talking like there's still I don't think, apart from the Mana collection, I don't really think that there's like a lot of just straight ports apart from games being on the Switch Online or something like that. The PS3 store, that kind of stuff.
I'm gonna make a quick argument, I
Yeah.
guess, from a artistic perspective, so to speak. I'm not an artist, just in case, before anyone throws me under the bus. But I heard this recently. I forgot from who, but when ports or remakes are done, the way developers sometimes see it, like think of it like an artistic perspective. If you're gonna paint something that you made a long time ago, you're not gonna just like copy paste it. That as an art from an artistic perspective, that's boring to you.
Right,
You know,
because
you
you
want to
have
do
the
some.
option to remake it or paint in things that you may have missed, right?
Same thing with games. So when you take something, if you're a developer, you're on the artistic side of it, and you want to bring that game back, you're not just gonna bring a copy paste of what it used to be. You want to do something more with it. You want to be more innovative with it. You want to be more creative. What couldn't you do in the past that you can do with it now? I think that's an argument that can be brought to the table as to why. Uh, and you are right. There should be an option of what it also used to be at the same time. But at least from what I see it, I think it's just like, oh, well, I'm not like I'm not gonna copy paste it. I'm gonna do something more with it because it's again artists tend to be that way. They're super creative. Their mind is always running. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think like Final Fantasy X. I played that more recently on the Switch for the port of that, and they had like little quality of life things they could add in there, like being able to speed things up or so forth. But graphically, they really didn't change that much. A lot of it was very similar when it carried over, which I actually did kind of appreciate. I know that's not a newer game that was ported, but
Yeah, they redid the music and they did redid the voice acting too, which is pretty big.
I mean, unless
Okay.
you're a rock star and you just put like your games to like an AI and hoping that the
That was such a mess. Oh.
Oh, the Grand Theft Auto collection. Yeah, you love to see
Yeah.
it. So, okay, I do, because this is a really interesting topic. But you know, does this okay? A lot of people say, oh, the reason why a lot of these older games are expensive and et cetera, is because they're not accessible on modern platforms. Tactics Ogre, for example. I am missing this game. I just got it. I'm missing it on PlayStation 1. Okay.
Mm.
Um, Now, you would think that having a more accessible release would take down that price, but it doesn't. That game is
Nope.
maybe it went down a little.
It very much depends. Yes.
And a reason for that is twofold. One, now you have a new version that's different.
Yep.
People like the old shit. You don't give people the option to have the old shit. They're going to want it still. That price ain't going nowhere, right? And even if they did, even if Tactics Ogre Reborn came with a port of the Super Famicom version, port of the PlayStation 1 version, port of the Saturn version, we go down this lovely RPG rabbit hole of 5,000 versions per game, right?
Yeah.
Even if you had that option, that price ain't going nowhere. Maybe by 10%, 20% at the most. Like, that shit's not gonna
That bubble ain't bursting anytime soon.
that bubble ain't
Sorry.
bursting, bro.
That bubble ain't bursting anytime soon.
So like, what do we do? You know, what is the coping mechanism here? What can we do? Jeremy, start with you.
Closest example I can think of this situation would be like Symphony of the Night as well. I know it's not exactly RPG, but that's been released everywhere, but the disc is still incredibly expensive if people want to go back and play that version, even with digital ones available. I mean, the only real relief out people are going to have, I know we keep tooting this horn, is going to be emulation for a lot of these were available. Because it comes down to the accessibility of something versus a person's personal preference. Where if they just want to be able to access it, that may be their only means to do it, or they're going to be limited by that accessibility, versus someone who's going to go out and they want to pay that money because they have the preference of wanting this physical item. They may want the game, but they may also want to look at the cover art. They may want to, do other things with it. And it depends on how much you really want to dig into that.
Sexual things.
Right.
Yeah.
If you want to actually just play the game, thankfully there are more options nowadays. Don't pay that money, emulate it, and go from there. But like if you're wanting to finish a collection, yeah, you're going to end up having to kind of bite that bullet because you're going to have an ever shrinking amount of a finite material, copies of that game that are out that aren't reprints and so forth, that more people are going to want, and that new release almost makes it worse because more people are now aware of it and they're going to go after it and eat it up even quicker, which brings the price up sometimes instead of down.
Exact. Pokemon, really good example. Gen 4 is still insanely expensive. But a part of that is also connectivity, right? Like, you can still technically bring your Gen 3 and 4 Pokemon over to Gen 9, which, by the way, comes out in 4 hours.
I'll be there.
And like, I think that's fascinating, man. There's always that tactile feeling of opening a game and having the manual and all this, the new game smell, the physical media. I don't think that that's really touchable in a lot of ways. And again, I think we, as a community, as a society, etc., should maybe try to like maybe devalue that a little bit. Yeah. And I don't really know if I have the right answer.
It's hard
for that. Yeah, it's hard. It is. And
like I'm going through my old disc games right now because I remembered, oh yeah, there's music on some of these games as a CD, and copying that over, but that's not on any of the digital copies. So I'm finding more music and hidden messages and things like that. Like that's an extra layer to it.
That's cool though. That's dope. But that's like, that's preservation, like it honestly is. And it's keeping people interested in it. Which I think is the biggest thing for companies nowadays is keeping people interested in this thing, because there are so many things. And I got a quick question for you guys too. Has there ever been a game that RPG specifically, that
Mhm.
you really wanted to play but never did because you were waiting on the physical media of it?
If I get an opportunity to touch a game before I can touch it physically, wow, that sounded horrible when that came out.
I didn't think
Holy
about it
shit!
that way, but damn, all right.
If I, I'll give a good example. Before this is still technically within the RPG realm.
Mhm.
The Cydia for PSP.
Yeah.
Before releasing in the United States, I played a downloaded ROM copy on a hacked PSP in
A
Japanese. Why? Because I didn't care if I get a physical copy or not. I wanted to play the hell out of that game. Personally, I can play a game digitally before I get it physically. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I mean, don't get me wrong, like you mentioned before, the experience of like opening the game, the new game smell, whatever. Is that awesome? Is that good? Of course it is. Yeah, not gonna lie. But we should indeed, in a consumerism sort of conversation, devalue that.
Mhm.
Because, and again, I am the type of person where if I can play a digital game first before getting it physically, sure, I'll play digitally. If I have enough terabyte storage, sure, why the hell not?
Funny that you said that right when Golden Drummer said this comment, because he said Kingdom Hearts 3, I couldn't trust the shipping time, so I bought it again digital at midnight to start, and then 2 days later it showed up physical. So funny enough, I am doing that tonight because I bought Pokemon Violet digitally, and then I
Mhm,
bought the double pack for my girlfriend and I also um, physically. So what's going to happen is I always play both versions of Pokemon, right? So
mhm,
I'm gonna play through Violet when it comes out at midnight, and then when the physical version comes out, or whenever Target decides to ship me it, I'll play the other version physically. So
mhm.
like Pokemon ends up winning my money twice, and you get the inverse version. So I think that yeah,
And if there's one company that doesn't need your money twice, it's the Pokemon
yeah, they
company.
don't. Yeah, I should. I feel like.
I might be buying 3 copies tonight, so yeah.
Well, you have kids too. You have a
That's
Very
family.
true, yes.
yeah, that's the other reason I was gonna bring up was, like, I think that's one, like, I know you don't have kids, Joey, but, Mark, do you have any kids?
I have 3
Okay.
dogs. It kinda counts.
Okay, well, they just eat your cartridges and stuff.
Exactly.
Um, so I've always enjoyed the physical side of the games, and I was trying to think of examples where I wouldn't play a game until I found a physical, and there's actually probably a lot of examples where stuff like limited run games and things like that, where a physical copy would come out, and I finally dive into it. Near Autonoma, I didn't want to play until I had a physical copy, and they never released it physically on Xbox. It was only digital, so I finally picked it up on Switch. But if I get a physical game here, it's part of my collection, the preservation, the other stuff, which I do enjoy and kind of go into that. But it's also shareable around the house. It's very
Yeah, yeah, that's
easily
a
I can
big
go,
thing.
hey, Jeremy, try this game out, or hey, John, try that, or Jennifer just takes my Kirby games the moment they exist. I just started buying her own. There was just the only way I could do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a different way for people to look at it as well.
Yeah.
Like, you're making me kind of self-conscious, Joey, and some of the stuff because I was thinking about doing videos where I am going through the collection and kind of looking at how things are, not because I'm like bragging, but because it's
No, no,
something I
it's
want to share with
yeah, it's
people.
a share. Yeah, right. And
And
yeah, yeah. No, don't take my words too like personally. I guess it's
I was just like, oh,
no, it wasn't directed toward you or even a judgment on us. Just
I
something to
know.
like
I was just
challenge.
laughing about it. Yeah.
But yeah, no, dude,
Because
fuck you.
there's a
You
definitely
suck.
well, there's a mentality to that when you have somebody that is, oh, well, here's my, my Iron Man Exo man, this is great. You should have this. And I also ruined this disc the other day, sadly. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it was the only disc got eaten up trying to copy the music off of it. The disc was actually kind of warped, ate it up
oh,
like a 360
Oh
game. I was
shit.
like, it's easy to replace. The rest of it's fine, but that's just a joke, that little thing. But that kind of comes into it also with just being able to share it with other people. So
yeah,
I personally think that the main solution, Joey, to answer your question from earlier, like what can we do, so to speak, I think there's 2 things that could be done. One, to devalue the whole physical thing is support your indie developers.
yeah,
Indie developers on Steam, they mainly do their games, digitally. And a lot of indie games that are like retro JRPG style, they are amazing.
mhm.
They are. That's one thing. Like I think the focus should be shifted towards, those style of games because again, they're really good. And two, But the whole elitist thing that we went, just to go back to super quick, if anybody here is listening is one of those type of people, stop mocking younger players when they want to play retro games.
Amen.
Stop mocking them. Stop trying to gatekeep it, because those people are spending money. Those kids are spending money on Steam to keep those games alive, and they're streaming them and keeping the whole awareness up to date. So, just in case, I wanted to throw that out there. But again, also support your indie developers, and that will help bring the whole digital aspect, into, I think, more to fruition.
Yeah, also I noticed a really I don't know why it's taken me this long to make this analogy, but physical game media versus music and vinyl. You know, a lot of people who collect vinyl don't have a record player, don't listen to the vinyl. That's dope. That's awesome, because when you buy a vinyl record, you get that beautiful art, full scale. Everything looks bigger. It's more of a display item, etc., etc. The vinyl's pretty. You get the nice little euphoria chemicals when you see it, and
You should enjoy it though. But
right. Well, I mean, that being
That
said, yeah,
dopamine
dude,
fix.
yeah. But I'm fucking like annoying about like if an album is not mastered analog or remastered for analog, it's gonna sound like shit on vinyl, and unless you have an amazing stereo system, it's gonna sound like shit. And even then, it would sound better if you just bought it on CD, right? So like that being said, like I'm not gonna like try to discourage people from buying vinyl, because it keeps a lot of bands from, or it keeps bands interested in making physical media still. I watched this happen with the underground scene, with hardcore, screamo, indie rock, all that kind of stuff. Like vinyl records in the early 2000s, like were like kind of really super fucking niche, and only like even then, not all bands did it. Not all bands pressed vinyl. Now, if you have a pretty decent following, you probably should be pressing vinyl because people are buying it. It's like a limited run games of your music. And like I feel like that's kind of where physical media is going. And not to say that there's not a fucking stupid resale market for vinyl sales, for, and not just mainstream bands, or not just underground bands, but also mainstream bands too. Not to say that resale market isn't jacked up too, but that is so much less of the gatekeeping, I guess, restrictive quality than music. Because you could just download music, you could stream music, you could buy it from Bandcamp. That stuff is accessible. And to me, I think that's the end game, right? Like, physical media not being a way to gatekeep or keep things inaccessible, but to be a sort of supplement, whether it be like aesthetic or something like in Jeremy's case, or even my case, where like I like having the big thing that made me start buying physical again is sharing it with my girlfriend, so she can play it on her Switch, and I don't she doesn't have to use my Switch because I was buying it digital, right? To share in a household if I had kids, etc., etc. If my snake wants to play it, but he's getting there.
Thinking of my snake game on Switch now. All right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that we did offer a couple of ideas and concepts for how to sort of do that. So I do want to we are running a little bit low on time. I do kind of want to like get like a little in the more warm fuzzy kind of thing. So let's talk just a little bit about some games that we own that we're really pumped about. And Mark, I'll start with you. What's something that you're proud of, man?
I'm playing the hell out of God of War Ragnarok right now, and that game is freaking amazing. But
Yeah.
but as far as the JRPG aspect goes, I'm looking. I don't own it yet, but I'm looking forward to Crisis Core. Obviously, when it comes out, that's one. I played it a long time ago on PSP. But if there's one game that I do value super hardcore, unfortunately, I don't own it, but I do have it emulated, is still Mario RPG. I will always have that game super dear to my heart. Always. That's one game I will always value. One day when I can afford it, maybe I'll get a physical copy, but in the meantime, I'm happy with it on my SNES Mini.
Bro, it's cheaper than Magical Knight Ray Earth.
I know.
I may have an extra copy that could possibly come your way.
Ooh.
Mario RPG. I mean, it's not going to be boxed because I really don't care about box, but
I love you anyway. Trust me.
I will see what I have.
You,
look at this.
we just
Bringing
became best friends.
I'm here. I'm here for you. I will do what I can. I'll have to see if I still have that extra one.
I will slip you my digits later on.
I didn't think you were gonna say digits. I
Yeah,
thought that
I
was
was
gonna
kind of
be a
worried
different
too. I
word.
saw it, and I was like,
Yeah, the
"Whoa,
first two
Digits.
we
letters.
really
Digits.
don't tell our wives."
I am married and happily so.
But this is Super Mario RPG now.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Uh,
Oh
no,
man,
that's cool, man. Like, and you have the Lunar games as
Oh
well,
yes.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Hmm?
oh nice.
Lunar 2 belongs actually to my wife. When I moved in with her, she's like, "Yeah, I had this game when it first came out like years ago. I played it and I loved it.
What?
I beat it in just a few days. Yeah, it actually belongs to her. And it's thanks to her that I finally got to play it not too long ago. She's had it since it first released, like the complete version. She loved it when
Dang.
she was in college. And so she was like, "Oh yeah, here you go." And I Lunar 2 became, I kid you not, one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. It is just so charming. It's much more lighthearted than the first one, but that lightheartedness just gives it so much of a charming character. Like, and the characters are just amazing. Like, they're so compelling that you can get super immersed with the development. It's such a great game. That and Final Fantasy IX is like also another game that I will never ever let go of. I have like 3 copies of Final Fantasy IX.
Hell
One great,
yeah.
and that's because I've had them for like just like for years.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And Armor Plays, thank you so much for the sub. I'll just quickly say one that I'm really proud of, and it's well, I guess a big collection that I have is the finally filling out the Ogre collection. So I have the Super Nintendo one, missing the manual. I think I'm missing the manual of Super Nintendo, which sucks because it's very expensive. But I have the
Yeah.
box, I have the cart, it's perfect. I have all the Ogre Battle 64, which is also insanely expensive. Really happy with that, and I don't like those games. Like for me, they mean a lot because I played those games when I was a kid, and they were very niche, and nobody knew about them. And it was cool to be able to have something that was like kind of unique to me that nobody like was my own special thing. And so for that in that sense, I don't think I really, even though they might not be like the most like expensive things in my collection or whatever, I don't care about that because my personal value is there, and I like the art, man. They look cool. Jeremy, how about you, man? What you got?
I have a lot in this collection, but the ones that mean a lot to me are not always the ones that are most expensive. Like if I want to go into that, I've got like still in box Nintendo arcade machine components and glass marquees and other rarities and weird oddball stuff I collect over the years. But stuff like an old RPG that I go back to that I still like to play, and it's actually the only one I've actually streamed all the way through online because I've played it, was Secret of Evermore. It's always
Oh,
been just
love
like a
that game.
comfort to me. I love it. I go back, and I think it took me like 3 nights streaming it to go through the entire game, and it was just funny watching me go back through it again. Um, for a lot of those, and of course, I have my Wii U collection, which we talked about. I finished that as a complete set. I did as a challenge to finish last year, which, oh boy, the prices went up right after I did that, so I got lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, the expensive ones I already had, but I got that also based because of something with my family, with stuff that happened with my daughter years prior, where the Wii U was the first system she was able to play with us, and it's kind of become a thing with our family. So I wanted to go ahead and finish that set, and it will be the only one I ever finish because no. But yeah, like I'm always looking at and posting stuff or digging through the collection and kind of getting it out there. So I'm sure more of that'll pop up later because that's my point of my collection. I'm not trying to hoard or all that.
Yeah.
It's something I
Mhm.
want to have and share and educate others in gaming and all that stuff around it.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Piece of advice for everyone: if you want to collect, I personally suggest our PS2. They're much cheaper. I got a copy of, which by the way is another, not a JRPG but a game I treasure, Freedom Fighters. I love that PS2
Oh,
game
hell
yep.
so
yeah.
much. I got it for like $10 on eBay. $10. So want to start
What
somewhere? Start there.
Start
yeah.
PS2, yeah.
Yeah.
If the way I look at it now for a lot of these systems, I get the appeal of using original hardware, but almost every one of them has an option now for either an ODE or an optical disc emulator or other ways to do it. even for PS2, because PS2 is starting to become really expensive and harder to get for the really good games that people are
Yeah.
wanting, where there's titles up over $1,000 now for
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
ones, which is ridiculous.
Even
But
something like Silent Hill 2, which by the way we're streaming in about
yep,
a half hour. Silent Hill 2 is very expensive now, and even with the remake, they're not bringing the port of the original, so it's like
yeah, it's because, well, Silent Hill has always had issues with their ports. There were usually major issues
yes.
and break-in, so people want to go to the fixed version, which drove it up again. So,
Yeah, because the HD remaster on PS3 was like super buggy.
oh, it was
It
broken.
was. I have both the PS2 and the PS3 version, and I always do go back to the PS2 one. Because that PS3 version, I tried playing it once. I was
Dude,
like,
I
wow,
heard
I
about
play my
this.
Xbox version usually.
I heard
which
those
is
versions
probably
of
the
it.
best one.
Yeah, so
Eh,
yeah. Well,
it goes back
actually,
and forth.
so funny enough, and this is the last point that I'll really make on this subject because I think it's actually kind of topical to this. Is that
Hmm?
we're streaming Silent Hill 2, but it is the the PC port of the PS2 version with HD textures, 4K res, and a lot of cleaning up that happens. Unfortunately, some assets were lost or like unable to be mastered in high quality. So you have a
Right.
couple sound assets. I noticed that were mono, a couple aberrations. But to me, that's the definitive way to play this game.
I heard
And
about it. I
Really?
heard it's great.
Okay.
it's like that, like Golden asked earlier if ports or definitive versions of games had an option to play the original, would you pay for it? Absolutely, dude. If the Pixel
Yeah.
remaster of FF1 had the FF1 NES or Famicom and it was like pay $10 for it, man, I don't care, juice me. Like fucking, whatever. Like that's what we want. And like maybe when the stuff happens at first, it's expensive, but like I don't know. Maybe we need to try to tell companies what's up with this. I just
Well,
figure out how to do it.
yeah. I
But yeah.
think oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I wanted to bring this up earlier as well, but I think the biggest in a perfect world, if things worked how they were originally supposed to be before companies went in and pushed for wanting profit on everything, digital should have been the cheaper option for everybody because there is no physical production or any of that stuff to be out there. And then let people like me or those that want a physical pay that extra bit. I will gladly pay the extra $10, $15 to get my physical copy if that means someone getting it digitally would get it cheaper as it should have been, because it in a perfect world should kind of balance itself out some.
Hmm.
I mean, you're never going to stop people that are like, "Oh, I've got this, I'm better than you." But because no matter what you do, they're going to do that. They'll have their digital copy and go, "It's on a better hard drive."
Yeah,
But
yeah. There's always goalpost moving, right?
yeah,
Like, um,
Always.
yeah. And I really do want to say thank you guys so much for joining me. I do have to say this podcast. I feel like this happens with Jeremy sometimes where it gets a little bit more passionate that maybe I originally intended. But I think that this is like a really fun exploration, maybe sort of straight off from the original topic. But I think that we
my bad.
did. No, it's not your fault, dude. I'm just fucking around. It's all me. But I do think that we touched up on a lot of stuff that's like really important to us as people who play RPGs and who people who appreciate RPGs. That these things are important, and it's important to keep that culture alive. And it's really cool to hear different perspectives and different lifestyle choices with like the way that we do this kind of stuff. So thank you guys again for joining me. I do have to wrap it up now. We are going a little bit over, but that's okay. Real quick, Jeremy and Mark, where can we find you guys on the internet? I'll drop some links in the chat.
You first,
Mark.
Daddy.
Oh, okay. I guess
Yeah.
we're starting with age before beauty. Got it.
Damn, the Mario
Um,
RPG offer really got to, man.
I got a way to find things. I'll see what I can do. You can find me at Zenspath, Zenspath, over on Twitter. You can also find me when I'm doing my own show at the Zenspath 4-Button Podcast, which is available pretty much everywhere, or over on YouTube, youtube.com/ZenspathCom. Twitter is failing, dying slowly. So I am starting up the blog again over at zenspath.com, which you guys were nice enough to post for earlier. Thank you very much. Where I'm starting the article specifically about collecting and kind of diving into that, with the more personal ones coming up tomorrow, talking about personal collections, like the meaning behind those, as well as, stuff about my brother. So,
Oh yeah, really stoked to read that, dude. Hell yeah.
Mhm,
Yep.
definitely.
Mark, how about you, man?
All right. Well, you guys can find me, I guess, primarily TikTok because that's where I'm popping off. But TikTok is SmallSprite TV. On YouTube, I'm doing my best to push my YouTube as much as possible. I got a couple of videos up. You can find me also as SmallSprite TV on YouTube. I mostly I do like synopsis on like games that I really like. For example, I did videos on Castlevania 64 and Mario RPG as well. In addition to that, yeah, They're pretty long too. They're like 27 minutes, but I do my best to go as deep into
cool.
those games as much as possible. Twitter is at SmallSprite3. Unfortunately, I'm on Facebook as well. You can find me there. Unfortunately, I just made one just in case, but I do my best to like post stuff as much as possible. So you can find me there. For it to be easier, I have a link tree. If you just go into Linktree and you look for Small Sprite 3, I mean just Small Sprite TV, you'll find me there with all my links,
Cool.
and
Yeah,
should be able
posted
to
that.
pop off from there.
Awesome. Yeah, post that in the chat. So all that stuff should be available when I put this up for the VOD and the podcast stuff on audio stuff. You can find all that in the description. Thank you guys again so much for this. I'm sorry if there's a lot of stuff that you guys wanted to say that we just didn't have time to. That's just the nature of this business.
You're good.
Yeah, would love to have you guys on again at some point. You guys are great. Thanks, chat, for hanging out and giving us a lot of love tonight. We never get subs during this, and that means a lot. So, Armor Plays, thank you again,
Yeah.
man, so much for that. And we will see you. Actually, funny enough, Thanksgiving weekend fucked everything up. So, next week, I think we'll be doing this on Friday instead of Wednesday. But I'll keep you guys posted on social media. Keep eyes on that. Stick around on the channel. We'll be doing Silent Hill 2, finishing that up. Kelly is just about to finish the game tonight, and I believe John from Cerulean Skies will also be on. So again, Mark, Jeremy, you guys are fantastic. Thanks again, and we will see you